This took place a couple of Halloweens back, maybe 3 years ago now. I'm 30 now, but I was 27 at the time. My day had been incredibly long. I volunteer coach for a youth soccer league, and we'd hosted a fall tournament that doubled as a Halloween event. We had kids running around in costumes between games, a trunk or treat in the parking lot, the whole 9 yards. It was great seeing the kids have fun, but coordinating everything, plus coaching my own team, left me completely drained. Running community events is part of the deal when you volunteer like this. Rewarding, but exhausting. By the time I got home, all I wanted was to crash. Maybe an hour passed. It was getting dark, around 7 p.m., when my younger cousin called. My cousin, let's call her Maya, needed a favor. She wanted me to take her and her little brother, let's call him Leo, out trick-or-treating. Apparently, neither her parents nor my aunt and uncle felt up to it that year. As the fun older cousin, the duty naturally fell to me. Maya was 16, a bit old for it maybe, but Leo was only 10 and really excited. Despite my fatigue, I couldn't say no. I dragged myself up, changed into something warmer, and drove over to my aunt's place. When I arrived, Leo was already bouncing off the walls, dressed as some kind of futuristic space ranger, complete with a helmet that lit up. Maya was still adding finishing touches to her witch costume, adjusting a tall, pointed hat. Once she was satisfied, we piled into my sedan.
I decided to take them to a newer subdivision, known for being generous with candy and generally very family-friendly. We got there, parked, and started making the rounds. The neighborhood was buzzing with activity. Decorated houses, fog machines, spooky music, the whole atmosphere. People were friendly, handing out handfuls of candy. One house even had a lady giving out warm apple cider and donuts, saying she preferred offering something homemade since the night was getting chilly.
We saw plenty of other groups, kids admiring Leo's light-up helmet and Maya's detailed witch outfit. I spotted some impressive costumes myself. Someone had even built a giant wearable transformer costume. We worked our way down several streets, their bags getting satisfyingly heavy. As we finished the last house on a cul-de-sac and started heading back towards the car, the crowd began to thin out. It was maybe a 15-minute walk back. The streetlights cast long shadows, and fewer porch lights were on now. That's when a flicker of movement across the street caught my eye. Someone was standing perfectly still in the shadows between two houses, just beyond the reach of the nearest streetlight. It was surprising I even saw them, but I have a habit of scanning my surroundings, especially when I'm responsible for kids. Peering closer, I could make out a figure dressed entirely in dark clothing. Maybe a dark hoodie pulled up and their face was obscured, maybe by a mask or just the deep shadow. I couldn't tell their build or gender. They seemed to be facing our direction. An uneasy feeling started prickling at me. I pulled Maya and Leo closer. "Hey guys, stay with me," I said quietly. "See that person over there between those houses? Just glance, don't stare." Maya looked and I saw her expression shift from tired to concerned. Leo, ever the optimist, whispered, "Maybe it's just a decoration." But there was a stillness about the figure that didn't feel artificial. Just to give context, I sometimes carry pepper spray, especially when I'm out after dark, and Maya knew this. Seeing my own sudden seriousness probably clued her in that this wasn't just me being overly cautious. Leo, thankfully, remained oblivious to my deeper unease. As we continued walking, keeping a steady pace, I risked another glance. The figure hadn't moved, still facing us. It was unnerving. We were about halfway back to the car when I heard it. The distinct crunch of footsteps on dry leaves behind us. Too heavy and deliberate for a child. I spun around. It was the same figure now emerged from the shadows and walking on the sidewalk behind us, maintaining a distance but definitely following. Under the streetlight, I could see more now. Dark jeans, sturdy boots, a dark zip-up hoodie, and a plain, featureless white mask covering their entire face. No eye holes, no mouth slit, just smooth white plastic. That mask elevated the situation from weird to potentially dangerous. My mind raced. "Okay," I whispered urgently to Maya and Leo. "Listen up. Don't panic, don't run yet, and don't look back right now. That person I pointed out, they're behind us. We don't want to provoke them. Just act normal, keep walking." I squeezed Leo's shoulder gently, hoping to convey the seriousness without terrifying him. Maya nodded grimly. We walked, the sound of those steady footsteps following us. Every few seconds, I'd casually turn my head as if looking around. They stayed about 30 feet back, matching our pace. When my car finally came into view, they were still there, still following. My heart was hammering. This wasn't right. As we reached the car, they continued approaching. That's when I made my move. I quickly unlocked the doors, pushed Maya and Leo towards the back seat, and then turned, pulling out my pepper spray and holding it ready. "Why are you following us?" I yelled, my voice louder and shakier than I intended. The figure stopped abruptly, maybe 10 feet away. They raised their hands slightly, palms out, in a gesture that might have been placating or might have been mocking. Then, slowly, they reached up and pulled off the white mask. It was a man, probably mid-40s, with tired eyes and stubble. He didn't speak, just held the mask and stared at me, his expression unreadable. I kept the spray aimed. "I asked you a question. Why are you following us?" What he said next sent a chill down my spine. His voice was flat, devoid of emotion. "Just making sure the kids get home safe. Lots of weirdos out on Halloween." His explanation felt completely wrong. If he was concerned, why hide in the shadows? Why wear a featureless mask? Why the heavy boots and the deliberate following? Making sure they're safe by following them in a creepy mask? I shot back, my hand tightening on the spray canister. "Who are you?" He didn't answer immediately. His eyes scanned past me, towards the houses behind him, then back to me. A faint, unpleasant smile touched his lips. "You ask a lot of questions." Just then, movement from the corner of my eye. 2 more figures stepped out from the gap between the houses he had originally been standing near. Both dressed similarly in dark hoodies, faces obscured by shadow. They started walking towards us, not fast, but with purpose. My blood ran cold. This wasn't some lone creep. "Maya, Leo, get in the car now," I shouted, not taking my eyes off the man in front of me or the approaching figures. As soon as I heard the car doors slam shut, I backed up quickly, fumbled with my own door, got in, locked everything, and slammed the accelerator. Peeling away from the curb, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The man with the white mask was still standing there, watching us leave, that unsettling smile fixed on his face. The other 2 had stopped at the edge of the road, just watching. The drive back to my aunt's house was tense. Maya was crying silently in the back. Leo was just staring out the window, pale. I dropped them off, walked them to the door, and waited until they were safely inside with my aunt before driving home, checking my rearview mirror constantly. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, the image of that blank white mask, and the man's chilling words. Why us? What had they been planning? A few days passed with no incident, but the unease lingered. Then one morning, I found a small, cheap white plastic mask, the same kind the man had worn, tucked under my car's windshield wiper. No note, no explanation, just the mask. I called the police again, told them about the mask. They took it as evidence but said without witnesses or a direct threat, there wasn't much they could do. I never saw the man or the others again. I moved out of that house 6 months later. I still volunteer coach, but I'm much more wary, especially during community events. That Halloween taught me that sometimes the real monsters don't need elaborate costumes. Sometimes they just wear a plain white mask and watch from the shadows waiting. And the scariest part is never knowing why they chose you. This one goes back to when I was 11, maybe 12. It was Halloween itself, and my folks decided we'd spend the weekend at this rustic lodge place called Whispering Pines, maybe an hour-and-a-half drive from our suburban home. They wanted a change of pace from the usual neighborhood trick-or-treating grind. Whispering Pines was advertising a whole Halloween weekend bash, pumpkin painting, costume parades, spooky storytelling, and the main event, a haunted tractor ride through the woods surrounding the property. It wasn't a massive resort, more like a collection of maybe a dozen log cabins, a central lodge with a dining hall, a small pond, and a large meadow they used for outdoor activities. Thick forest pressed in on all sides. During the day, it had a cozy, autumnal charm. But as dusk settled, those woods turned into walls of blackness, and the quiet felt less peaceful and more isolated. We arrived mid-afternoon. I remember the smell of wood smoke and roasting marshmallows hitting me as we got out of the car. Kids in partial costumes were already darting around the grounds. My parents mentioned the haunted ride started around dusk, maybe 6:30 or 7, with other activities beforehand. While they settled into our cabin, I eagerly went to explore. There were game booths, apple bobbing, guess the candy corn in the jar, a makeshift haunted walk through a decorated tent. Fake cobwebs and plastic spiders seemed to cover every surface. I quickly teamed up with another kid my age, Kevin, who was decked out in a vampire costume, complete with plastic fangs. His family was in the cabin just down the path from ours. We hit the game booths, managing to score a decent haul of cheap candy and plastic spider rings. As the sun dipped below the tree line, painting the sky orange and purple, families started migrating towards the meadow where the tractor ride was set up. An old farm tractor, hitched to a large flatbed wagon lined with hay bales, waited near an equipment shed. Maybe 25 or 30 people climbed aboard. Kids, parents, a few teenagers. The driver wore a creepy clown mask, slightly askew. A couple of staff members dressed as ghouls milled around, promising scares along the route. The ride began just as full dark descended. They'd placed flickering electric lanterns along the bumpy dirt trail leading into the woods. The air grew cold. The tractor rumbled along slowly. Every so often, someone in a monster mask would leap out from behind a thick pine, or a figure draped in white sheets would moan from the deeper shadows. Most people jumped, then laughed nervously. It was standard haunted ride stuff. But then, maybe 10 minutes in, a weird feeling washed over me. We were passing through a particularly dense section of woods, the lanterns spaced further apart here. The tractor seemed to hesitate, engine sputtering slightly. I glanced off to the right into the near-total darkness between the trees. And that's when I saw him, standing just at the edge of the lantern light's reach. He wasn't one of the costume scarers. I knew that instantly. He wasn't dressed for the occasion. He wore what looked like a faded green work jacket, worn jeans, and a plain, dark blue baseball cap pulled down low, casting his face in complete shadow. He was just standing there, utterly still, hands jammed into his jacket pockets. My first thought was maybe a groundskeeper or someone who lived nearby, but he wasn't moving, wasn't doing anything, just watching the wagon pass. I felt a prickle on my neck as I realized his posture, his whole presence, felt focused. On us. On the wagon. Maybe even on me. I looked around at the other families, chattering and laughing, pointing out the next fake ghost. No one else seemed to have noticed him. When I forced myself to look back, he was still there, a dark statue against the darker trees. A knot formed in my stomach. I tried to shake it off for the rest of the ride, telling myself it was nothing, just part of the spooky atmosphere getting to me. When the ride finally looped back to the meadow and we all climbed off, I took one last look back down the trail into the woods. He was gone. I didn't say anything to my parents then. What was there to say? I saw a guy standing in the woods. It sounded dumb. We rejoined the remaining activities near the main lodge. They had a bonfire going, s'more supplies laid out. My parents found some chairs while Kevin and I ran off to see if any candy booths were still open. The creepy feeling started to fade. Maybe an hour later, it returned with a vengeance. Kevin and I were near the edge of the main gathering area, trying to see who could build the tallest tower out of sugar cubes from the s'more station. That's when I saw him again. Same guy, same green jacket, same dark cap. He was standing about 50 feet away, near the tree line that bordered the meadow, partially obscured by a large oak, just watching. There were still plenty of people around, maybe 30 or 40, mostly adults now, talking by the fire. It made his solitary presence even stranger. My breath hitched when I realized he seemed to be looking directly at Kevin and me. I strained to see his face, but the cap in the distance made it impossible. Just that dark shape under the brim. "Kevin," I whispered, nudging him. "Look over there by that big tree. Is that the same guy from the woods?" Kevin squinted. "Who? Oh, him? I don't know. Maybe he works here." No way, I insisted. He was just standing there during the ride, remember? Kevin shrugged, more interested in his sugar cube tower. Probably just some dude watching the party. I wanted to believe him, but my gut screamed otherwise. He wasn't watching the party. He was watching us. A few minutes later, distracted by a spilled drink, I looked back. The spot by the oak tree was empty. By around 9:30, things were really quieting down. Most families with younger kids had turned in. Kevin and I, however, weren't ready to call it a night. We asked our parents if we could walk the loop path around the cabins one last time before bed. They agreed, telling us to stick together and be back in 15 minutes. There was a less used gravel path that branched off behind the last cabin, heading deeper into the woods, supposedly leading to a scenic overlook we hadn't seen. Kevin, feeling brave, suggested we just go a little way down that path, just to see how dark it gets. My unease about the man returned, but I also didn't want to chicken out. We had our small flashlights. Okay, but just a little way, I agreed. We stepped onto the gravel path. Immediately, the sounds of the lodge faded. The air felt colder, heavier. The only sound was the crunch-crunch of our sneakers on the gravel. We probably only went 50 yards in, the woods thick and black on either side, our flashlight beams dancing nervously. We reached a small bend in the path. Okay, this is far enough, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Kevin nodded, suddenly looking less brave. That's when we heard it. Not footsteps this time, but a soft snap, like a twig breaking underfoot, coming from the woods just off the path ahead of us. We froze, aiming our flashlights towards the sound. Nothing but dense underbrush and tree trunks. "Hello?" Kevin called out tentatively. Silence. Then a low voice, startlingly close, murmured from the darkness to our left. "Looking for something?" We jumped, spinning our lights that way. The man stepped out from behind a massive pine tree, not 10 feet away. Same green jacket, same cap shadowing his face. "Didn't mean to scare you," he said, his voice quiet, almost gentle, which somehow made it even creepier. "Just taking a walk. You boys shouldn't be out here alone, though. It gets real dark." Neither of us could speak. He took a step closer. "Saw you collecting candy earlier. Bet you didn't get any of the good stuff, huh?" He reached into his jacket pocket. "I've got some full-size chocolate bars back at my place, not far from here, just through the woods." He gestured vaguely behind him with his thumb. Kevin instinctively took a step back onto the path. I could feel my legs trembling. "No thanks," I managed to stammer out. "We gotta get back." The man's posture stiffened slightly. "Don't be like that," he said, his voice losing its gentle edge. "It's Halloween. Just trying to be friendly. I saw you liked the hayride." Hearing him confirm he'd seen us before sent ice through my veins. He had been watching us. I grabbed Kevin's sleeve. "Let's go!" I screamed, and we bolted back down the gravel path the way we came. For a terrifying moment, I heard heavy steps crashing through the underbrush behind us, keeping pace. He was chasing us. I didn't look back, just pumped my legs harder. Kevin right beside me, gasping for air. The path felt impossibly long. Finally, the lights of the cabins appeared through the trees. We burst out of the woods, screaming for our parents, not stopping until we practically collided with a group of adults still lingering by the now dying bonfire. Several people jumped up, alarmed by our frantic entrance. I risked a look back at the dark mouth of the gravel path. It was empty. Our parents rushed over, demanding to know what was wrong. Between panicked breaths, we told them everything. The man on the ride, watching us by the trees, following us, trying to lure us away with candy. Kevin's dad and a couple of other men immediately grabbed larger flashlights from the lodge and headed towards the gravel path. They were gone for maybe 10 minutes, searching the area near where we'd encountered him, but found no sign of anyone. Someone from the lodge called the sheriff's department. A deputy arrived about 40 minutes later, took our statements, listened patiently, and drove around the resort roads. He told our parents they'd patrol the area, but admitted finding someone in the woods at night was unlikely, unless they wanted to be found. That night was sleepless. My parents locked the cabin door and windows, but every creak of the wood, every rustle of leaves outside sounded like him. The next morning, the deputy returned. They hadn't found anyone. No unfamiliar vehicles were spotted. No guests matched the description. Their best guess was a local or someone camping illegally in the surrounding woods who decided to cause trouble. We packed up and left Whispering Pines before lunch. The entire drive home, I scanned the woods lining the highway, half convinced I'd see that green jacket and dark cap watching us go. For months afterward, random men in baseball caps would make me jump. Kevin moved away a year later, but we emailed for a bit. He said he had nightmares about it for a long time too. Nothing ever came of it. No one was ever arrested. No similar incidents were reported at the lodge. Thinking back now, what terrifies me most isn't just that he tried to lure us, but how calculated it seemed. Seeing us on the ride, watching us later, then finding us alone on that path. It felt planned. If we hadn't run, if we'd hesitated for even a moment. I shudder to think. It taught me a hard lesson early on. Sometimes the most dangerous threats aren't the obvious monsters, but the quiet figures watching from the edge of the light. My name is Mark, and this went down on Halloween night about 4 years back. I'm 32 now, working a pretty standard tech support job. Pays the bills. Back then, I was newer to the company, often pulling the less desirable evening shifts. Halloween has always been my favorite holiday, a good break from the routine. So I was looking forward to it, even though my shift ended late. I planned on just catching the tail end of the trick-or-treaters and then settling in with some classic horror movies. At the time, I lived alone in a rented bungalow on a quiet suburban loop. It wasn't super isolated, maybe a quarter mile between houses, screened by trees. But things definitely got dead silent after about 9:30 p.m. when most families turned in. My girlfriend was visiting her sister out of state that weekend. Since it was just me, I usually kept a bowl of candy by the door until around 10. I was familiar with the occasional doorbell ditch, standard Halloween stuff in that neighborhood. That particular Halloween landed on a Friday. The weather was crisp and clear, perfect autumn night. By 11 p.m. I was done with candy duty, lights off, and sprawled on my sofa, half watching some slasher flick, picking at the leftover Snickers. It had been quiet for over an hour when I heard a soft tapping sound, seemingly from the side door that led to the carport. I figured it was super late trick-or-treaters or teenagers messing around. Annoyed but curious, I paused the movie and went to the door, peering through the peephole. Nothing, just the dark carport, empty driveway beyond, and the sound of wind rustling the last of the autumn leaves. "Kids," I muttered, shaking my head, and went back to the couch. Maybe 20 minutes later, I heard it again, tap, tap, tap. But this time, distinctly from the back door, the one opening onto the small patio overlooking the woods behind my house. That immediately put me on edge. No one ever came to that door. I muted the TV, heart suddenly pounding. Silence. Then a faint metallic scraping sound, like something thin sliding against the doorframe near the lock. Slow, deliberate. My mind went into overdrive. Was someone trying to jimmy the lock, believing it might be unlocked? I slid off the couch, staying low, and moved towards the kitchen, which had a window looking out onto the patio. Peeking cautiously over the sill, I saw him. A figure was crouched by the back door, dressed in dark, baggy clothing. He had a generic, grinning plastic goblin mask perched on top of his head, revealing a gaunt face underneath in the dim patio light. In his gloved hand, he held a small pry bar, working it near the doorknob. He wasn't frantic. His movements were methodical, focused. He knew I was home. My car was in the driveway. A light was on in the living room. Most prowlers avoid occupied houses. This felt different. I retreated silently, grabbing my cell phone off the counter and dialing 911, keeping my voice to a barely audible whisper as I explained the situation. The dispatcher was calm, professional. "Stay on the line. Lock yourself in a secure room. Do not confront him." The bedrooms were upstairs, but the stairs were carpeted and might creak. The basement door was closer, in the hallway. I opted for that, slipping down the wooden steps into the damp coolness below, pulling the heavy door shut but not locking it. Didn't want him to hear the bolt slide. I crouched in the dark at the bottom of the stairs, phone pressed to my ear. Clutching a heavy Maglite flashlight I kept down there, the only thing resembling a weapon I could grab quickly. I relayed updates in whispers. I could hear faint scraping sounds from above, then silence. Then a distinct thud against the side of the house, near the small basement windows. He's at the basement window now. I breathed into the phone. My voice cracked. The dispatcher assured me officers were close, lights and sirens off for a stealth approach. The next sound made my stomach clench. The squeal of metal on metal as he tried to pry the window frame. This guy was determined. It felt like an eternity passed. The dispatcher kept asking quiet questions, keeping me grounded. Then, above the sound of the prying, I heard the crunch of gravel, tires approaching slowly up my driveway. Headlights briefly illuminated the dusty basement window from outside. Suddenly, the prying stopped. I heard scrambling footsteps outside, moving away from the house quickly. Relief washed over me in a dizzying wave as I saw the flicker of police flashlights through the window. "They're here," I whispered, my voice trembling. "He's running." The dispatcher told me to stay put until an officer cleared the house. Minutes later, a firm knock on the basement door. "Police, Mark, are you down there?" I opened the door to two officers, guns drawn but lowered. They quickly swept the basement, then the main floor, confirming he hadn't gotten inside. Outside, another officer had the man in custody near the end of my driveway. As they led him towards the patrol car, I saw what they'd pulled from his backpack lying on the grass under a streetlight. The pry bar, a roll of thick rope, heavy-duty work gloves, and a hunting knife. This wasn't about stealing my TV. This was something planned, something personal, something terrifying. The police later informed me the guy had priors for assault and stalking in another state. He offered no explanation for targeting my house specifically. To this day, being alone in that house, especially around Halloween, triggers that icy fear. Every creak, every tap sends my mind racing back to that night. What haunts me most isn't just that he tried to break in, but why? Why my house? Why persist when he knew I was home? And what would have happened if those officers had been delayed, even by a few minutes? The police found something else in his car later. Detailed notes about my work schedule and when my girlfriend usually wasn't home. He hadn't just picked my house at random. He'd been watching.